Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We're going to have a fun one this morning. Elizabeth has already and I have been talking. And in fact, she just said, hey, let's save it for the podcast, which is usually my line. Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to spend this time with you today.
That is so sweet of you to say. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Beck, and I'm a writer and an artist. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and I am celebrating the publication of my new collection of short stories called Swan Songs. And it's a collection of stories about women and their relationships to other women. But each one of the stories is framed by a different musical artist. And my books of poetry and my novels and now my short stories weave the music that I love within the pages. And this particular collection, I stretched a little bit. So it's the framing structure that is around music, but it's not about the actual musicians. So one is oriented around Dolly Parton. One is all about jazz and infused with Thelonious Monk and Coltrane and Brubeck. And two of them are dedicated to the Grateful Dead because I am a Deadhead, first and
Okay.
foremost. And there is a nod and Easter eggs to my beloved band Phish. My Summer Tour trilogy is a collection of novels about a kid named Sam who falls madly in love with a girl named Claire and joins her crew and goes on Phish Tour 2019, set lists included. And
Wow.
yeah, so I'm a
Well,
big Phish fan.
good. I cannot wait to have a talk about this. We're going to delve into the books and your music, your creative process, but always start at the beginning. So
Okay,
talk about Elizabeth. Where did you grow up? And was there a lot of music in the house when you were a youngster?
yes. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and that is a steel mill town, Italian Catholic community, although I'm not. And all of the boys in high school listened to Bruce Springsteen and were absolutely devoted. So I have never seen Bruce live, but I am quite familiar with his music.
Well, you haven't
My
had time because you're doing Fish or the Grateful Dead.
right, that's
We
true.
understand. You get a pass. We all are passionate about different things.
That's true. I do have a background in classical music. My collection of poetry that was published last year, called Dancing on the Page, is a memoir in verse.
Okay.
And it begins with the beginning music of my childhood, which was classical music, infused with a lot of the Beatles and folk music and rock and roll. And then I cover the advent of the first day of MTV, which was the summer I came home from Camp Fitch when I was in eighth grade.
Yeah.
And then in 1986, I went to art school in Cincinnati and discovered the Grateful Dead, and then found Phish in 1992. And today is a sacred day. Today is the end of the days between. It's the day that Jerry Garcia died.
Oh,
So he was born on August 1st and died on the 9th. And the 8 days are known as the days between, which is a famous Grateful Dead song. So we celebrate all Grateful Dead this entire past week. So I'm coming off the high of it all.
wow. That's so great. So I'll tell you what, dealer's choice. Normally, I will ask my Springsteen guest, can they remember when they first discovered Bruce and what about his music spoke to you? So I'm going to have you do the same, but either Fish or the Grateful Dead or both.
Okay. May I do it through poetry?
Please.
Okay. Here's the introduction poem to the collection Dancing on the Page.
Okay.
And it starts with an epigraph from the Velvet Underground. It reads, if Jenny said when she was just 5 years old, there's nothing happening at all, we would have been best friends. Probably why I bark laughter of recognition hearing these lyrics. At 18, I knew there was nothing happening at all, yet everything was. Jerry Garcia shines his love light, and I follow. The world melts away as I enter a universe I've yet to abandon. Grateful every note cradles my broken soul. Relieved to feel at home when I have no other. Open to receiving love when strangers stop strangers and roses are free. All stemming from a simple song I discover in a college art studio. In those days, I said everything I wanted with a brush on canvas, seeking truth in blades of grass, following Holden Caulfield, studying psychedelic clouds, finding Lucy's diamonds. My first dance steps in front of television, a toddler walking as if on a bubble as Neil Armstrong lands on the moon. After Neil Cassidy drives the bus, I get on, escaping parents who should have been the death of us all. I'm still wondering how I'm alive.
I love that.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah. So I'll go back. Were you a big reader as a child?
I was a voracious reader, and I had a walk in closet in my bedroom that was lined in shelves where my books were, and I would go in there and spend endless hours reading. And I was also an artist. And so in second grade, my mom arranged for me to have private art lessons with this wonderful lady, Clavel Shear, who lived up
Mhm.
the top of my street. And I would get on my bicycle on Saturday mornings and pedal up the hill to Clavel's. And I learned how to paint first with oils and then moved on from there and until I attended art school in Cincinnati.
Can you articulate what about the art spoke to you?
I think that I've just always had a tendency to be drawn to colors and textures and enjoyed the process. And Clavel taught us kids with oil painting, and oils take a long time to dry.
Okay.
So when we had downtime, she would have us crack open art history books. And so I discovered Vincent van Gogh at a very young age and fell madly in love with him. One of my collections of poetry is Painted Daydreams, a collection of ekphrastic poems by Accents
Okay.
Publishing. And the cover of it is actually the dogwoods of Van Gogh. It's my love letter to him. And I taught English and art history for 20 years in the inner city schools in Cincinnati and Lexington, Kentucky. And through that process is then how I evolved into being a writer. All of my books deal primarily with overcoming trauma through connecting with music, art, and literature. And that's what the focuses are. And I think, especially in today's society, after we've all gone through a global pandemic, I
Sure.
don't think there's anybody who hasn't experienced trauma in some way, shape, or form. That's what my groove is all about.
Why is it, and not to get personal, was it a personal trauma that led you to that, or just an empathy for the world?
Both, both,
Okay.
Jesse. And some of my books detail that my characters in fiction and in poetry have their own traumas. And I think that we all share the same resonating. But when I found the Grateful Dead, that's really where I healed. I
Okay.
had a second childhood, and it was chasing live music was what we did when we were in college in
Okay.
my group, my friend group. And it was just something that carried on throughout my whole life. Now, I wasn't a big fan of Phish to start with.
Oh,
It was a boy band, and we would go to shows, and you'd see a group of four guys and one girl, and then
yeah.
five guys and one girl. There weren't a lot of women, and that was very different than the Grateful Dead community, where there was quite a matriarchy of
Yeah.
older women that I really looked up to. But now that's long changed. Women have a strong presence in the Phish community, and I've met some really lovely people over the years. And I've joined the vendor lot now. I put up a book tent, and
Yes.
I've met the dream poet for hire. This guy wears this jaunty Jack Kerouac hat and sets up a typewriter on the lot, and you tip him a buck, and he'll write you a poem. And We do pop-up poetry readings and all sorts of fun stuff. It's shenanigans.
I love that. And I often talk about Elizabeth that, and of course I'm biased, but I go that I don't know if another band, musician, has a as a passionate fan base as Bruce Springsteen, with the exception of maybe the Grateful Dead and Phish.
Yeah.
I just think that they have this, and in fact, gosh, probably one of my first year or two, I had a woman on who had written a column about her boyfriend slash husband, I can't remember, was a huge Phish fan, and she was a huge Springsteen fan, and how they were making it work. It is the amount of times you've seen somebody perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. You have shared that you haven't been lucky enough to see Bruce. Do you count Phish and Grateful Dead shows?
I don't count.
Okay.
I know a lot of people do their show counts, and
Yeah.
I have a family. My son is 24 years old. I had a career in teaching.
Yeah.
Fish conveniently went on hiatus when I got pregnant, so
That was not, they did that for you, Elizabeth.
of course they did. Trey
Yeah.
Anastasia, he and I are pals. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But no, my husband and I do see as much as we can. We catch shows. The advent of live stream has revolutionized
Yeah.
everything. And
Sure.
I have an app called Live Fish. So say I stream the show and I make it to first set. I'm a little older. I get tired if I'm just couch touring.
Sure.
The next
Oh,
morning,
I've never heard that term, couch touring.
oh, it's a
I
big
love
thing. There's
that
a culture
tour.
to it.
Yes.
We have group chats and the whole thing. So it's a whole culture. And
Because there is this last tour, and actually for the past few years, but with Bruce, there are people that will live stream it. And people, I tend to, because I have all the other crap I'm doing, I tend to not follow that. But I do know that there's tons of people, that's how they get their fix of
well,
live
I'm
Bruce.
so committed to Fish that like I'm coming off of summer tour. I only
Uh-huh.
attended the 3 days in Boulder, Colorado. I
Okay.
flew out to Folsom Field, but I stream note for note every single. And as I was saying, if I go to bed, then the next morning when I go to the gym, I put my earbuds in and listen to second set, or
Yeah.
I'll take my dogs on a walk and I'll listen to the next set. I also subscribe to Sirius XM Fish Radio. Love Eliza Alachan and Jonathan Schwartz. I'm big fans of the DJs there.
Yeah.
So they keep us in the loop with all of it. And Fish is just like the Grateful Dead, that there's no two shows that are ever the same.
Right.
They don't, even if they do repeat a song in a tour, they don't play it the same way. I personally think that Fish is the best extemporaneous jazz band right now that I can find. And gosh, I went to see a local jazz, like true classic jazz
Yeah.
show last night. It was at a glassblower studio. How
Oh, how
cool is
fun.
that?
That was very
So
cool.
it was hot, but they fired up I don't know what they call them, kilns,
Yeah.
glass blowing, and the guys were to hear the jazz players were up there, and this guy's wailing on a harmonica, and Lee's holding down on the keys, and then the guys were blowing glass in behind, and it was super cool. But because I've studied so much jazz, and that was really how I got connected into Fish from Grateful Dead, was through the jazz connection, and it speaks to my soul.
Expand a little bit on that about the connection between the two and how you transitioned.
Well,
Included, you didn't change. You have a quote unquote open marriage, so to speak.
I don't know if Kevin would agree with that.
No, exactly. Open musical marriage.
Oh, musical marriage, indeed. Yes, Grateful Dead and Fish are different. Just because they're
Yeah.
both jam bands doesn't. They're different. And it was when I was introduced to the idea that Fish had memorized and played an entire Miles Davis album, and this was back in the '90s, and I was like, wait, what? And
Yeah.
then I started really paying attention. And then They did a gag on Halloween for many years where they would memorize and play entire albums from beginning. That was their musical costume. So
Hmm.
they did the White Album by the Beatles. They did the Velvet Underground. They would play. So they come out and they play the first set of their own music. Then they take a set break. Then they would come out and do the entire album from beginning to end, and then they would close with their own music, and they did it for years and years. There really isn't anything much they can't accomplish. And this past weekend in San Francisco, all the Grateful Dead heads descended upon San Francisco. It was the 60th anniversary of the Grateful Dead, and Trey Anastasio Band opened on Sunday night there at Golden Gate Park, and then Trey sat in with Bobby and Dead and Company, John Mayer, and played with them. It's a loving connection. It used to be a kind of a rivalry where Deadheads hated the Phish fans and what have you. That doesn't exist so much anymore, I don't think. So I think it's more of a kind of a love relationship for all of us. We're all lucky enough to live at the same time as Bruce Springsteen, Trey Anastasio, and Jerry Garcia. That's pretty profound, right? We didn't get to see Mozart,
Right.
Handel, Bach,
Yeah.
Beethoven. These are our guys.
Yeah.
So it's exciting stuff.
It is. And especially when you look at, I know famously Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Brian Wilson would have this fun competition between themselves. But it was purely, oh, I can't believe what they've done. I wonder if I can do something better.
Okay, so let me tell you about the Billy Joel Fish competition because
Oh,
it's
please.
not friendly.
Oh, okay.
Fish notoriously takes over Madison Square Garden for a week or two in December, culminating into New Year's Eve.
Okay.
And several years ago, I'm sorry, I
That's
misspoke.
okay.
Billy Joel wanted to book the garden. And they said, well, I'm sorry, you can't have it. Those dates, Fish has it booked. And he was like, Fish? Who's Fish? I played a dozen shows at MSG. So
Yeah.
what did Fish do in response? They did the Baker's Dozen. They did 13 shows at Madison Square Garden just to show Billy Joel up. And because it was Baker's Dozen, then they played off of it, and they handed out donuts to the fans, and
Oh.
every night was dedicated to a different flavor.
Hmm.
So when it was strawberry night, they covered the Strawberry Letter 23 song. When it was, I can't recite them all off, but
Sure.
there's different flavors for everyone. And it's a joking rivalry, but we do have what's known as the Fish Studies Academic Conference.
Yeah.
And last year it was at Oregon State University, and I was accepted as the feature poet.
Oh, how
It
fun.
was amazing to see. I sat in these panels where these professors, these PhDs, these academics from all over the country took their area of research and applied it within the Fish community. And they asked me to open up the Fish Haters Ball, and which is all tongue in cheek. And they had a fake Billy Joel and all the things, and it was all in fun or whatever. But we showed Billy Joel. We showed him.
I love that. So let's talk about you've always felt this desire to create. What was your first is it because in your mind you can't choose and you figure why have to? Yes, I love prose. Yes, I love poetry. Yes, I love music. Yes, I love art, but I don't box me in. I can't go into one channel.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think they all feed each other. We writers make jokes that we take breaks from poetry by writing prose, or we take breaks from prose by writing poems.
Yeah.
And what a great way to procrastinate, because what you're doing then is creating. So, for example, I came up here to my studio to prepare for our time together
Hmm.
and checked my mic, and I had about 10 minutes. And so I sat down and I'm working on these watercolors that I'm doing paintings and then handwriting my poems on top of the paintings, which are known as broadsides. Traditionally, they're printed, but I'm doing them by hand. It's just a little project I'm enjoying. And I think that the symbiotic process of responding, the ekphrastic process of responding to music, responding to the art, making art about all of it, converges in a beautiful way, and you should be open and receptive to all of it. My new thing is I want to learn how to play piano.
Okay.
I don't have a piano.
All right.
I've never played the piano, and I just told my husband the other day, "Hey, dude, I think I'm going to get a stand-up piano." He's like, "Where are we going to put this?" I was like, "I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get to that point." But I think it's important to keep yourself young, explore new things. For example, I have a BA in English literature and a minor in fine arts painting. And here I am 35 years later, just now teaching myself how to watercolor. I never studied watercolors. So I think it's important as artists that we push ourselves and try new things and expand all of that. And I think it heightens the mastery of your work.
Elizabeth, you've just made a statement that I didn't know I wanted. I've always been curious about, but you woke up when you mentioned I've never studied watercolor and you talked about oils taking a while to dry. What is the, as a novice, I go, you paint, right? There's a blank
Right.
canvas, you've got a brush, you've got your materials. What's the difference? Can you
Well,
explain?
yes, the oils were the traditional paints that were first used. Then they developed plastics, so we have the availability of acrylic paint. And then, of course, there are the watercolor paints. So those are a little bit different than, a lot different, actually. I don't work in oil. I do work in the acrylic paints and the watercolors, and I also do what's known as mixed media, where I'm collaging. For example, I'm a journal writer,
Okay.
so I think through writing. It's just my process. So I buy cheap sketch pads from the grocery
Okay.
and I collage my covers because it pleases me. And then
Right.
inside are just the white pages that I fill with black ink.
Yeah.
And throughout the day, I write in my journals. Now, that's different than constructing my fiction and my poetry. When I'm actually composing a poem or composing or writing any kind of fiction, I do it directly onto the computer.
Okay.
That everybody has their own methodology. I attended this really lovely meeting of women artists last week, and it was very inspiring. And one of the things I liked that one of the artists said was, and this was a rule I made up for myself, and these are the rules that I follow. And that's really what we artists do, is create our own rules. I'm sure Bruce has his own rules of how he composes or how he performs on stage. Or I know that Trey and Phish are a bunch of gearheads. They love their gear. And Mike
Yeah.
Gordon, the bass player, has a whole social media account about him talking about the cool pad that he stands on now and how it reverberates and changes. And Trey has really specific guitars, as did Jerry Garcia. And Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead, created the Wall of Sound, and that had never been seen before. And they literally put these huge speakers. There's a wonderful documentary about the Grateful Dead told in 4 or 5 parts. It'll take you days to get through, but it's totally worth it. And one of it's completely devoted to the Wall of Sound. And so I think by stretching the boundaries of what we can do as artists helps us grow.
Is there anything that, what haven't you done that you want to?
Like I said, play piano.
Yes.
I did pick up a djembe drum about 15 years ago, and I practiced djembe drumming, West African drumming, with a lovely musician in town named Trip Bratton.
Hmm.
And he is wealth of knowledge. So he'll say, okay, today we're going to learn this from West Africa mixed with Congolese, mixed with Caribbean. And he gives all the background and the history and all of it before we learn the polyphonic rhythms. And I love the drumming because it's truly the only 2 hours of the week where I can't focus on anything but the rhythm that I'm drumming, because it's when he'll break us in, we have a circle of drummers, and so we three play one pattern, and then they layer, the next group plays on top of it, and we all lock in. And it's like being on a
Hmm.
roller coaster. You just have to hold on and go with it.
Let's talk about your latest release. You
Okay.
mentioned it a little bit, but let's do a deep dive into it. Talk about where the origins of that, why you decided that at this point in time, this is what you wanted to share.
Swan Songs was published by, it's my second book with Accents Publishing. Originally, it was a hybrid collection. It was going to be short stories about women that, as I said, the framing structure was going to be one particular artist. I love to research. I'm a huge researcher. So it was a great opportunity for me to do a deep dive into artists that I wasn't as familiar with, such as Dolly Parton and Tina Turner. I
Okay,
never knew that Tina Turner had a Buddhist meditation practice, and I delved into that pretty deeply. And then I was weaving poems in between it. And I met with Katerina a few years ago, and I had all the stories, the 13 stories written, and then in between were the poems. And she says, I'll take the stories, I don't want the poems. And I said, okay. That gave me opportunity then to sit down and expand the poetry and really delve into that and reshape that. And it became, I lucked out 2 different books, and it was published by Rabbit House Press. So last year I debuted Dancing on the Page, the collection of poems that ended up being a memoir in verse. And as I said, really got into different genres of music that influenced my life. And then this year, actually, it was just 2 weeks ago that I had my book release party, and we debuted Swan Songs, and it's that collection of prose. Now, this is after I've written a trilogy of fiction. And so the first novel is called Summer Tour. I had finished writing it in 2020, and I was sending out query letters to get a literary agent to go the traditional route of publishing. At this point, I had a few collections of poetry with small presses, and I wanted to take it to the next level.
sure.
However, the pandemic hit, and we went into quarantine, and all the concerts, all the shows, everything got canceled. And here I had this completed novel about, this kid who goes on Phish tour, and I even included the set lists of every show he went to, modeling off of Peter Connor's Growing Up Dead. Peter Connor's book is about Grateful Dead, mine's about Phish.
Okay,
Peter's is a memoir, mine's a piece of fiction. But they're both about young men who go on tour with these bands and reconcile their own traumas and griefs, and it's a maturation journey. So on June 1st, 2020, I went ahead and hit enter, and I published it myself on KDP, and it became a huge hit in the Phish community because all the Phish fans were hankering for a show, and so they bought it up. And then I went on, I realized, hey, I've got a group of teenagers here who are going into their senior year of high school. It's 2020. So that means graduation's canceled, prom is canceled, they're in
yes.
quarantine. So I wrote World Gone Mad. That was the second book. And World Gone Mad is a big hit with actual teenagers because they are impressed I wrote it IRL. Like I was literally a month behind what was happening in our world.
Wow.
So it's like at the beginning, the stepmother is like putting on rubber gloves to go shopping versus wearing a mask. We didn't know enough back then, like all these little details. Then I finished it in 2022 by writing the third novel, Under the Elm, and it operates as a prequel, so it flashes back to 1979. It's all Grateful Dead, not a drop of Phish. And it tells the whole story of how the Calico House came to be, the backstory of Sam's mom, the whole hippie tradition. And so writing Swan Songs, the collection of short stories, was a natural progression from moving from writing 3 novels back to back. So
Yeah,
my joke about Summer Tour Trilogy is 300,000 words are still not enough to express my love for the band.
I love that. You, what I, what will probably interest only me, but last week I had a guest who was in his 70s, Vietnam vet, and he just published Tracks of My Tears, his autobiography, but songs are the main theme.
Oh,
He
I love
would
this.
he would talk about a song and share with it about why that was important to him at that time of his life. His previous book had been about music in Vietnam. He said he was in the air-conditioned jungle because he was behind the lines working in public relations. And so his experience of music was different than someone in a tank or in the infantry or on an aircraft carrier. And I sent a link to the book to my good friend. I have a friend named Terry Smith who used to do a podcast, Music Talks. And the premise is his guest would pick a different song for every decade they'd been alive. For example, I was born in 59, so I had to pick a song from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. And then based on those songs, he would go through with his guest and basically tell the story of their life. So I'm sitting here thinking, going, boy, I wish Terry was doing the podcast because now then I would want Elizabeth to be a guest.
I'm absolutely fascinated. You're very intuitive, actually. My very first collection of poetry was the Rip the Band-Aid Off collection about the trauma I went through. And because I was born in 68, the backdrop of my childhood was the Vietnam War. And because I have complex PTSD, I really have studied a lot of Vietnam War survivors and how they're coping and handling their mental health and
Yeah,
staying centered. And music is absolutely one of the tools that we survivors, and I'm not a war survivor. Please don't think that I would ever
yeah,
equate my childhood, but I did use codes of conduct from the United States Army within that collection of poems and equated, and some of the poems were named like waterboarding or bunker or different war terminology, and I used that kind of as
yeah,
a framing structure. But even back then with those poems, they still wove music, a lot of Beatles and music from my childhood. My dad was a big rock and roll fan, and on Saturday mornings I would pick an 8-track, and he had the entire Beatles collection. So I'd pick a Beatles 8-track and I'd put it in the stereo, and then I would go and lie under the dining room table and listen to the entire album from beginning to end. And that was how I spent my time. I wasn't a big television person. My little brother was a big TV kid. In the mornings before school, we would get our cereal, and he would set up in front of the little TV, and I would open my book. And I was a
yeah,
reader, and he was an athlete, but music was a uniting element in our family
yeah.
and a big part of our family. I've always have music on at all times. I gave birth to my husband burned CDs. This was before we had streaming when I gave
Yeah.
birth. And he burned nonstop Phish shows for me, and 26 hours of Phish got me through.
Now, is he a fan as well?
No, my 24-year-old son wants nothing to do. Now, I will give him credit. He knows the whole catalog. He was raised, I never took him to Phish.
Yeah.
But I did take him to a lot of Dead and Company things and Phil and Friends, and he was raised with Mo, the band. So I can put on a song and he can discern whether that was Jerry Garcia, Trey Anastasio, or Chuck Garvey from Mo. He
Okay.
knows his music, but he's a hip hop kid, and I let him
Okay.
follow his bliss. And I really enjoy it from being a teacher. I like my kids to teach me music. And
Sure.
when I was teaching in the inner city of Cincinnati, Tupac was still alive.
Yeah.
And I loved hip hop and R&B from back in the days of Soul Train. I even
Yeah.
have a poem about that. I have a Catholic taste in music, meaning
Yeah.
wide ranging.
Sure.
And as I said, the boys that I dated and everything, the Italian Catholic boys were all
Yeah.
about their Bruce. They loved him.
Yeah. How about your husband? Is he a fan?
My husband was not and is now a
Okay.
fan of Phish. So he was familiar, but he was more into Nine Inch Nails and more like that kind of a scene, that
Yeah.
90s kind of grunge rock scene or what have you. And then he got brought into the culture and now is as much a part of the scene, and he has his own friends in the Phish world, and we set up on the lot the guys will get together and they'll have little planning meetings like, okay, we need to get this done and that, because we work as a family.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of our culture, is we are a family. We have even the customers, our custies are part of our family, but when we set up our real estate on the lot and put our pop-ups up, and we work together, we make change, we keep an eye out for each other, we get ice for each other, those kind of things. And Kevin's got an engineering brain, so he's always valued in the scene. And he's such a kind person that people are always drawn to Kevin, for sure.
What is there something that sells the most when you set up shop?
My art did really well. For 5 years, I practiced dot mandala painting.
Okay. I'm not sure
This
what
is
that is.
okay. So, do you know what a mandala is? I'll show you. Mandala is sacred geometry,
Okay.
and we create these patterns. One moment.
Sure.
Here's a sticker I created of one of my.
Oh, okay. That's very
Okay.
pretty.
So we use the geometry and we lay out the pattern,
Almost
and
like a
then
spirograph that you grew up with.
oh yes, and yeah, and we have the templates for it. And I started on rocks, and then I moved to using wood discs, and you paint them black, and then you mix your acrylic with a little bit of enamel, so it's raised, bumped,
Okay.
and you literally have these dotting tools, and you put your tool into the paint, onto the thing, into the paint, onto the thing, and so it's a meditative practice. My writing practice for 5 years was in the afternoons, I would dot. And while I was dotting, I was making up the stories that would go into my novels.
Okay.
And then in the mornings, when I woke up to write, I wasn't facing a blank page. I had already created what the next scene was going to be the previous afternoon. So I would tell my customers, for every word that's in Summer Tour is painted is a dot. And a lot of people collected, because then I would drill holes and string them with beads and make mobiles out of them, and sun catchers and things that you could hang pretty in your house. And a lot of the fans of my novel then bought my art, because for every word in the book was a dot. And then that was significant and spiritual to them.
Sure.
However, this January, I just ended the practice, because after 5 years of dotting, I just can't dot
Had enough.
anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm like that. I work in series, and then I move on to another one. I did a mosaic tile series for a long time. I always work in mixed media. I enjoy cutting up paper, and I'll cut pages out of books and create trees and things like that, and work with beads and adhering different things and working with the paints. And as I said, right now I'm practicing with the watercolors and other things and exploring different avenues.
Once again, let's plug the latest release.
Yeah,
And where can they
sorry,
find
Jesse.
it? No,
Katarina's
no.
going to kill me. I'm a
No,
terror.
she isn't. No, she isn't. She's good. This is a great conversation.
Okay, hold on. Let me show you how pretty the book is.
Okay.
I know your podcast probably doesn't have a visual element to
No,
it, but
I have a very small YouTube channel.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Most of my listens are through audio, but I do post the things on
Oh, video.
YouTube. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So here's the
Oh,
pretty cover,
that
Swan
is a pretty
Songs.
cover. Yeah.
This is a painting by the mother of modern art, Hilma af Klint.
Okay.
She was a Swedish painter. She was predates Kandinsky. So previously, Kandinsky was known as the father of modern art. Hilma was very protective of her work, and in fact had codicils in her will that you couldn't even show certain paintings till 90 years after she died.
Wow.
And so she's this new undiscovered woman artist. She has a collection of they have a collection of her work at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I plan to go in a few weeks to see it and stand there like a dork with my book and
Yeah.
show it off, and I was really drawn to the two swans because I call it Swan Songs. And I guess I live on a pond here in Lexington, Kentucky, and we
Okay.
don't have swans, but I do study the geese and the ducks and our sacred blue herons. And so it made sense to me that that was a good title. But
So I'm
the
a little
titles,
Go ahead. I'm going to let you answer that in a minute, but I'm a little curious why you didn't use a piece of your own art for a cover.
I have. Under
Okay,
the Elm was one of my dot mandala. I'll show it to you.
please.
This is Under the Elm, and that's my original artwork.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
it's a dot painting.
Mm,
And Summer Tour is an actual house that exists in Woodstock, New York. It's called
okay.
the Calico House. And a beautiful designer named Catwise is her business, creates these beautiful creations. And I'd followed her for years. So when I was writing Summer Tour, I reached out to her and I said, hey, Calico House would make a fantastic setting for my novel. Do you mind if I have permission to use it? So it's not about Kat at all.
Yeah.
It's not about her life, but she gave me permission and she allowed me to use the photograph. The reason I like the photograph is because it's not about Cat or Calico House. It's a reflection of it, a
Yes.
reflection. And then I received an invitation. I actually flew to New York and did a whole tour of all the settings. Sam was raised at Gramercy Park, and so we went to the park, and then we drove up to Woodstock, and that was very surreal and trippy. I had juxtaposed her house, and she does have a pond, but I juxtaposed it with my backyard, and I do have an elm tree. So that's why the last book is called Under the Elm, because a lot of important scenes happen under that elm tree. So I like that all flowed together then with that double image of Swan Songs. And there is an epigraph to the entire collection by Robert Hunter, who was the lyricist for the Grateful Dead. And it
Hmm.
reads, all I know is something like a bird within her sang. Some of the titles of the stories do come from songs. See Here How Everything is a snatch of a lyric from the Grateful Dead. Cosmic Charlie is part of the mythology of the Grateful Dead. Take Five, Dave Brubeck, that's my jazz one. Backward Down the Number Line, we use a lot of Easter eggs of Phish, and that's part of a Phish song. And I'm very careful about copyright. There's very strict rules that I studied because the last thing I want to do is when I'm writing love letters to these musicians via poetry and stories, I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I honor them and not step on their toes. But I have had opportunity to meet some of the
That
members of Phish.
that was my
Um,
next question. Have you met any of them?
Briefly, Mike Gordon, the bass player, notoriously comes on the lot, which is fantastic. It boosts morale. It makes everybody really excited. He's a kind and gracious man. And 2 summers in a row, I had opportunity where he came to my book tent and I was able to sign. And it was funny too. The first time I met him, I was in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was blazing hot, beyond belief. And Mike comes walking by and I stand up like he's a guy from college. I'm like, Mike Gordon, man, hey, like he's just some
Sure.
friend of mine. And of course, I'm like jabbing Kevin, my husband, get the phone, get these
Yeah.
pictures.
Get a camera.
And so we got pictures and I signed Summer Tour. And then the next year I was at Deer Creek and I was vending. I had my book tent and he happens to come up on the lot again and I gave him a copy of Dancing on the Page. And then Trey Anastasio, he did a acoustic, a very small little thing. I think this was in 2018. It was before the pandemic. And we drove to Dayton, Ohio.
Mm,
And I literally walked on stage at his encore, and I only had my first three books of
yeah.
poetry. Summer Tour wasn't even a book yet, and he was so kind and gracious. And I stood there, and he saw me, and he's doing the rock star nod and like talking to people, and then he came right over and shook my hand, and I wrote him a big heartfelt letter about how his music changed my life and how important he is, and was able to gift him copies. And I've been interviewed on Sirius XM Fish Radio,
No.
and I've also been on Tales from the Golden Road with David Gans and Gary Lambert, which is a big deal in the Grateful Dead world. I have a collection of poetry called Mama Tried. And although that's a Merrill Haggard song, it's also an anthem in the Grateful Dead community, and Grateful Dead play it a lot. So that's my collection of poetry by Broadstone Books that came out in 2022 that encapsulated my life as a public school teacher and as a mother. So they're
Okay.
my mother poems, my teacher poems. I really do work within themes. So,
Yeah.
I have the ekphrastic collection, I have the mom teacher poems and Swan Songs. I'm very proud of. I worked several years on these stories and let them really breathe and have room to develop and grow. And each one of them, as I said, is about relationships of women to each other. A Christmas Carol is a story that many suburban moms would understand. It's about a woman, and she both loves and hates her neighbor, another mom,
Yeah.
because her neighbor's like that kind of lady who has like the perfect job and doesn't have to like spend endless hours curling her hair. She just scrapes it back and she looks pristine and her diamonds are just a little bit bigger than everybody else's. And so this lady is hosting a Christmas party in July. And then the story starts out, who in the world celebrates Christmas in July? Pamela wonders as she pulls the tray of seasoned cereal mix from the oven. Of course, nobody asked Pamela to contribute, but if they were celebrating Christmas, what kind of holiday would it be without the mix? And it goes on and on. And it's their relationship and that kind of tension of jealousy and love and admiration and contempt that suburban moms and wives could have about each other. The opening story, See, Hear, How Everything, is about a grandmother and a granddaughter. And it
Hmm.
begins, Don't grandma me. You know damn well I won't answer to anything other than Bertha. The old woman snarls at her granddaughter. The younger woman nods as she opens the curtains, and it goes on and it says, her grandmother, whose actual name is Ethel and not Bertha for the record, reminisces about her Grateful Dead days while Miranda purposely tunes her out. And it turns out that Miranda's mom is a Phish fan, is on tour with Phish, and Miranda wants nothing to do with Grateful Dead or Phish.
Yeah.
So that was a nod to my son, who he was raised with it, he knows, but he's meh, that's your thing. You go on. I have no interest in any of this.
So, couple things. I remember Penn Jillette from the Penn and Teller was in his podcast said that he's always frustrated when a teenager talks about their favorite band and they'll name someone from classic rock. And he
Yeah.
goes, no, you are a teenager. Your job is to pick a music that your parents hate. That's part of being a rebel. And I joke about, and this is an overgeneralization, Elizabeth, but I mention this in almost every podcast that most of my guests fall into two categories: the people that love their parents' music, and as they grow older, they expand and take more into their musical quiver, but their parents' music have always been part of it. And others who can't stand their music, their parents' music, and then when they turn 30, they realize that Johnny Cash guy your parents listen to, he's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw that I reunited with my old Grateful Dead friends. We had lost touch. They moved to Nederland, Colorado in 95.
Yeah.
And we were reunited because Patty's neighbor bought a copy of Summer Tour to gift Patty for her
Uh-huh.
birthday several years ago, a couple of years ago. And Patty opened it up and burst into tears and said, "Oh my God, you found Elizabeth. We've lost touch." So we had opportunity to connect in Boulder, and our crew, which is what the kids are calling it now, were their 20-something kids. All their kids were there. They love it. Like, they are in it to win it. They were getting more down. They know the songs. Two of the kids work for the merchandise. So I do see continuations of the generations that enjoy it. I don't dictate what my son listens to or where his
No.
pleasure tends. That's his own decision to make. I'm proud that he was raised with it, and he knows a lot of jazz. I messed up in not teaching him enough about classical music.
Okay.
I
Oh,
really did.
you're
I
going to be
mean,
forgiven. You're
okay.
forgiven. Yeah, you're forgiven. You get your kid loving jazz. And so this may be a weird question because of how diverse both Phish and the Dead and company are. But I always ask a Bruce fan, what song are you still chasing? What is a song of Bruce's you haven't heard live that you want to hear? I don't even know if that's applicable with your fandom, but if it is, are you still chasing one?
Yeah, people do chase songs. Know if there's. I'm a terrible fan. I can't give you my stats.
No, that's okay. Oh,
I
no,
don't
that's
know my.
okay.
I would love to hear Petrichor, which is an orchestral piece that Trey created.
Okay.
I would, and I don't know if I've ever heard it live. I
Okay.
think I've only heard Strawberry Letter, which is a cover that he does, but Trey took voice lessons, and so now vocally, because he's sober, he's taking the band where Jerry could have, I think, taken the Grateful Dead had he survived and
Yeah.
gotten sober. But the sobriety is a big thing, and that's one of the things that I most respect about Phish is they're constantly creating new music.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary what's coming out of Trey's brain right now and the new music that's coming out. And every show I go to, it seems like I'm hearing yet another new song. So isn't that a form of chase? You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
being
What
afforded. It's not
next?
regurgitated or,
Yeah.
and I don't know what Bruce does. I'm not going to bash on him, but I don't know if he's a kind of guy. Does he go on tour and play the same show through the whole tour? And no offense or whatever,
No,
but
no, no.
that's where the jam band world
Yeah.
differentiates. And I get it. Listen, when I went to see Paul McCartney, and
Mhm.
I've seen him twice, I would be really super sad if I didn't hear some of my favorite Beatles songs.
Yeah.
I'm not going to see Paul all the time. I've only seen him twice. I want to hear Strawberry Fields, or I want to hear Penny Lane, or there's certain songs I want to hear if I'm going to spend that kind of money, time, and commitment. Whereas in the jam band world, you're
Yeah.
just not guaranteed what you're going to get. And you also go on a run like we did 3 nights of Folsom.
Yeah.
And so that becomes like its own little thing where you get into. Switching back to Swan Songs, because
Hang on. Just, I'm going to let you do some more promotion, but you've opened up a really great question. So take a drink of water while I go on for a minute.
okay.
Historically, Bruce has switched back and forth. Like during the Tunnel of Love tour, the set list was pretty static. At the Rising, set list was pretty static. Now, there was tons of the new songs from the Rising, which is about 9/11. Then he got into a spell where about 60% of the songs would be the same every night, but in different orders. Another 40% would be different. So
Cool.
you would
Yeah.
get, and then especially if he was playing the same venue over multiple nights. Now, they are old enough now that they have 2 or 3 days between shows. They
Hmm.
don't do back to back anymore. However, at the end of this, at the beginning of the 23 tour, he all of a sudden was not changing the set list at all.
Mm.
He was doing the same show every night with maybe one or two wild cards. And a lot of people, some fans were really pissed about that.
Hmm.
Like, why am I going to multiple shows if I'm going to get the same show every night? Now, there are others of us, well, that's first world problems. So think
Well,
about
all of
yourself,
us, isn't it?
right? And so he, and the reason why is he had, in his latest album, Letter to You, was all about mortality. A friend, the guy who, the first band, Bruce was in high school, and he was in high school, his first band, and George Thies, who was the band leader, died. And Bruce realized that he was the last person alive from that high school band. And so it really made him think about his mortality. So he had a specific set list that he wanted to tell. And there was a lot of angst, right? Oh, he's become an oldies act. Okay, he's doing 3 hours, and the set list is throughout his career. And even the hardcore people admitted if I was only going to one show, that's a damn fine set list. right?
Okay, so here's another connection, Jesse.
Yeah,
Trey Anastasio went through a very similar thing. He lost both his best friend and his sister to
yeah,
cancer. And so he wrote Ghosts of the Forest. It's an
yeah,
entire album. And he put together a particular band for it that included Jennifer Hartswick and Natalie Cressman, who are the horn players, phenomenal women, in
yeah,
Trey Anastasio band, which is his jazz band, offshoot of Phish.
yeah,
And this was a very specified, limited tour. And it was the entire album from beginning to end every single night. It was Ghosts of
yeah,
the Forest, and it's meant to be played that way, and it was meant to be received that way. So I'm fascinated that Bruce and
yeah.
Trey's in his
You should
just
check
turned
out
in
the
his 60s.
yeah,
I'm going to. I'm writing
yeah.
like a lot of this down, and
Letters to
yeah.
You is the album, and then if you have, I believe it's Apple TV, there is a making of documentary about it, which is fascinating because the interesting thing about it, Elizabeth, is for the longest time when the E Street Band would show up to record, Bruce would play the demo and it would be beat the demo. All right, if you can play this better than what I did, we'll put it on the record. And so this documentary shows that he would he didn't do any demos. He just pulled his guitar, started playing the song, and here's all these 60 and 70-year-old men with legal pads and pencils listening and writing and okay, here's what my part's going to be. I think it's a brilliant album. I think it's amazing that this is his last studio album. He's done other things. But, and then the latest tour, he did a very limited tour in Europe because he had gotten sick in 2024 and they had to cancel shows. So, since he was going to make good, he ended up doing it. And he's very angry about the current administration. And so he did a series that are pretty set list, but specifically, and that's available on YouTube and on Spotify. It's the Land and Hope and Dreams tour, including his thoughts about this administration and how he's unhappy with it. Yeah, it is this, you understand that what I like one of the songs I'm chasing is he did a cover of a Jolie Blanc, which was a French song that, oh, why am I drawing a blank on, that had been a hit for Gary U.S. Bonds. And so Bruce, about once every 3 years, pulls it out and plays it, usually with a sign request. And that's on my list of things I would love to hear, right? But you also, one of my guests said the set list is like the final score of a match. It doesn't tell you the story of the soccer game or the football game. It just tells you the end score. And he says, and that's what a set list is. A set list, unless you're there, you just because you see a list of the songs, you don't get the feeling and the emotion of doing that.
That's true.
It
Yeah.
really is, yeah. So continue now. I'm sorry to
Oh
interrupt you.
yeah,
You were
no,
talking about Swan Song,
it was
please.
actually perfect, Jesse, because Swan Songs is a political book as well.
Okay.
And I'm a feminist, and these
Hmm.
are feminist stories.
Yes.
So some of the stories do cover issues that women are facing. It's a political book in the fact that it's a feminist book. Cosmic Charlie was written the day after Roe versus Wade was overturned, June 24th, 2022. That story is probably the most autobiographical of the collection. It's written in first person based upon my experience waking to the news. Then I went to see a Grateful Dead cover band called Born Cross-Eyed at a bar here in Lexington called the Burl.
Yeah.
And we women danced to Men Smart, Women Are Smarter. And then I also referenced the 1965 Supreme Court decision, Griswold versus Connecticut, which protected the liberty of married couples to use contraceptives without government's restrictions.
Yeah.
This story, called Take Five for Dave Brubeck, is framed by Jazz, and the story is about a 74-year-old widow who claims, quote, "For the record, nobody is too old for an orgasm." which is shocking stuff even in today's society.
Yeah.
Domestic violence, death, despair are all issues I cover in these stories, but I like to think that my sense of humor rings through, lifting the stories from the dark and twisty. And so I respect and appreciate the political nature of what Bruce is doing. I feel that Phish, it takes on more of a let's do a temporary reprieve from gravity, which is a Phish lyric. Let me take you out of our reality, out of ourselves, out of what we're going through, and let you
Yeah.
escape into the beauty of the universe of Phish. However, Phish is notoriously known as a Jewish band. Two of the members are Jewish, and there's a famous book called This Is Your Song Too that's at the National Jewish Museum, History Museum, and Noah Lehrman was one of the contributing writers to that collection that really examines Judaism and Phish. So there was a strong police presence in at Folsom Field for protection, not to
Mm.
come at the fans, but to protect the fans, much the same way as I see at the Ohave Zion Temple at the end of my street.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, okay, are they political? They have a Shabbat. They'll do certain things. They do nods, but instead of like actually writing political, a lot of Trey's new music reads a lot of recovery stuff.
Yeah.
We have foundations. The Divided Sky Foundation helps recovering addicts, and Trey raised the money and created a treatment center in an underserved area in Vermont. We have the Mockingbird Foundation that provides musical programs in schools. We have the Water Wheel Foundation that provides water and opportunities for water in countries that don't have access to that. So they're very philanthropic in nature. And then they have the fellowship table for people who can go who are working their sobriety, much like the Wharf Rats existed in the Grateful Dead culture for people who are sober and need help and
Yeah.
support. We have the Fans for Equity, and then I have to plug as a feminist Groove Safe. And Groove Safe, Ashley Driscoll is doing a phenomenal job. She sets up a table and she's creating awareness about allowing men and women to feel comfortable at shows without being touched,
Yeah.
without being the touchy feely when you're in a dense crowd too. It's obnoxious. And she's really raising awareness, and it's called Groove Safe. I'm really proud of her efforts and have had the honor to meet a lot of the people who run all of these things. And Phish is very serious about their so from that perspective, they're political versus what Bruce is doing, which is actually using his lyrics to be political, different ways of approaching and
Yeah.
really making a change in society. And isn't that what it's all about?
It
Woodstock
truly is.
existed for a reason.
There is very
So,
much. All right, so Elizabeth, in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you for some final thoughts. If you want to share a poem, I would love that, and how people can reach you. But before we do that, I end every episode with the Mary question. And for those of you who perhaps are checking out this podcast because you love the Dead or Fish or just love Elizabeth's poetry, Jay Armstrong is a former high school English teacher. He's now retired. But when he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road, and they would read it as if it was a poem.
which it
And
is.
yeah, and would talk about the themes Bruce explores, the imagery he shares, and then he would ask his class, do you think Mary gets in the car? So, Elizabeth, as a poet, I am looking forward to your answer. So, feel free to expand any way you want. But the question is, does
Printed
Mary get in
lyrics
the
with
car?
notes.
Yay.
Okay, does she or do I think she should?
Why don't we give me both?
Okay, as a feminist, I say Mary needs to buy her own damn car.
There you
That's my
go.
answer. And
Yes.
my evidence for that
Yes.
statement is at the beginning, he says, don't turn me home again. I just can't face myself alone again. He's focusing on his needs, not her needs, his
Yes.
needs. And then he actually insults her and says, you ain't a beauty, but hey, you're all right.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's not a great way to entice a woman by being like, hon, you're not that cute. And then the turn for me, where I was like, no, Mary, don't get in that car. You go buy your own. Mary needs to buy a VW bus and get on the bus with the Grateful Dead and leave Bruce behind.
Mm.
When he says the door's open but the ride ain't free, excuse me, sir, what is it that I need to pay? What do I owe you? And I know you're lonely for words that I ain't spoken. Tonight will be free. All the promises will be broken. He's not even going to keep his vow to her. And this is his way of enticing her to take this ride. And he goes, I'm pulling out of here to win. And I'm like, fantastic, Bruce. You go, or speaker of the poem, however you want to term it, because
Yeah.
we wouldn't say Bruce, we would say the speaker of the poem. I say, go, baby, go. But you don't need to denigrate a woman and step on her head and entice her and insult her. So my answer is that Mary needs to buy her own. However, having said that, I've
Yes.
actually thought about doing a whole collection about, and I'm going to be very honest, my musical history, a lot of it, I learned from the boys I dated.
Yeah.
They were the ones who introduced me, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, Phish,
Yeah.
were all introduced to me by men.
Yeah.
So I relate to Mary and I relate to the speaker of the poem. I'm going to lay this one on. This is a high school poem, and I'm going to let you guess who the band is. It's
Okay.
called Us and Them.
All
I'm
right.
sure you already know.
Okay.
Discover dark side of the moon with boys in cars during eclipse, flicking cigarette ash, expertly trained to drink beer from bottles, clink as they roll underfoot, hours past curfew, parents too absent to enforce. Instead, we chase sex under great gig in the sky, comfortably numb, losing time because we were on the run, unaware of brain damage and too oblivious of money to care.
I love that. I love that so much. Elizabeth, if someone wants to reach you and find out more about your work, how can they?
My name is B, as in Barbara, B. Elizabeth Beck. I have a website. You can find me at www.elizbeck, so ELIZBECK, like the first part of my name, my last name, .com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, the dreaded talk. And it's all very much the same, B. Elizabeth Beck.
All right. I will include those notes in the show notes.
Jesse, this has
Yeah.
just been marvelous. What a lovely way to spend a Saturday morning.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing. I had a blast. I hope you did too. I am so happy that Katrina played matchmaker to us,
Yes.
and I will look forward to reading the book. I really appreciate your time this morning. And I tell you what, I'll give you homework.
Okay.
If you end up listening to Letter to You, the album, and watch the documentary, I'd love to have you back on and share your thoughts of the CD and comparing it to his trays and your thoughts on it.
That would be a really fascinating analysis to do, Jesse. Thank you
Yeah.
so kindly for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And then your homework
Okay.
is to find Ghosts of the Forest,
Okay.
and I want you to find the actual live performance with Jennifer Hartswick and Natalie Cressman on horns. They're all dressed in white. And you do Ghosts of the Forest, and I'll do Letter to You, and we'll compare notes and meet back, Jesse.
I love that. I
Yes,
am
let's
so happy.
connect and
Yes.
link this together because music, it's our universal love language.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what genre it is, we all love music.
Yes, I love that. All right. We
Cool.
will make it happen. All right,
Part
listeners.
two, everybody,
Yes,
stay
hang
tuned for
in.
part two.
Yes. Everyone, please go to the website, check it out, check out the books. For now, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye. Peace out, man.
Yay.